The Dawn's promise screamed through the atmosphere of Ketar 9 with the Velkari ships close behind. Commander Hajun sat at the helm, his hands dancing across the controls as he pushed the ship beyond safe limits. Explosions blossomed around them. The Velkari were not trying to disable them. They were trying to destroy them. Taeyang watched the tactical display. 3 heavy cruisers against 1 exploration vessel. The odds were impossible. But Hajun had always been good at impossible things. He dove toward the planet's surface using the dense atmosphere to scatter enemy targeting systems. The ship shook violently. Alarms screamed. But they were still alive. Dr. Nari clutched her data tablet like it was the most precious thing in the universe. In a way, it was. The information from the ancient archive was the only clue they had about what happened to Earth. She had barely downloaded half of it before they had to run. But half might be enough. Hajun pulled the ship up at the last possible moment, skimming so close to a mountain range that sensors screamed proximity warnings. Behind them, one of the Velkari cruisers was not as skilled. It clipped a peak and went spinning into the ground. The explosion lit up the sky. 2 left. Still terrible odds, but better. Engineer Minho called from the engine room. He said the jump drive was ready, but barely. 1 more hit and they would be stranded. Taeyang made the call. He ordered Hajun to get them into orbit. They would jump blind if they had to. The Dawn's promise shot upward, breaking through the cloud layer. The 2 remaining Velkari cruisers were waiting. They opened fire immediately. Shields flared and buckled. The ship lurched. But Hajun was already entering the jump sequence. Reality twisted. Space folded. And they were gone. They emerged in deep space far from any star system. The crew took a collective breath. They were alive. For now. Taeyang called an emergency meeting. Dr. Nari spread her findings across the holographic display in the conference room. She showed them fragments of text in ancient languages, images of structures that defied physics, mathematical equations that hurt to look at. The architects had been real, and they had been terrifyingly powerful. According to the archive, the architects had created pocket dimensions as sanctuaries during something called the Great Purge. Billions of years ago, something had threatened all life in the galaxy. The architects had saved certain species by hiding them in dimensional pockets, protected spaces outside normal reality. But there was something darker in the data. References to prisons, species that had been contained rather than protected, civilizations that had grown too dangerous, too aggressive, too unpredictable. The architects had locked them away to protect the galaxy from them. Commander Hajun asked the question everyone was thinking. Was Earth in a sanctuary or a prison? Nari said she did not know yet. The archive had more information, but she needed time to decode it, and she needed more data. The coordinates she had found pointed to 3 more ancient sites. Taeyang studied the star map. The 3 locations were spread across the galaxy. Visiting all of them would take months, and now the Velkari knew what they were doing. Every site they visited would be a trap. Engineer Minho spoke up. He said he might have a solution to their Velkari problem. While they were running, he had been scanning the enemy ships. Their weapon systems used a specific energy signature. He thought he could modify the Dawn's shields to absorb and redirect those specific frequencies. It was experimental. It might not work, but it would give them a fighting chance. Taeyang approved the modifications. They needed every advantage they could get. While Minho worked, the ship jumped to the next coordinates. A crystalline installation orbiting a black hole. The location was insane. The gravitational forces alone could tear them apart. But the architects had built in impossible places. Dr. Nari theorized that the extreme gravity actually powered the installation. They approached carefully, compensating constantly for the black hole's pull. The crystalline structure hung in stable orbit, glowing with internal light. It had been waiting here for billions of years. The away team took a shuttle to the installation. The structure was beautiful and alien. Walls made of material that looked like crystal but felt like metal. Corridors that bent in directions that should not exist. At the heart of it, they found another archive. This one was still active, its systems powered by the black hole itself. Dr. Nari connected her equipment. Data flowed faster here. The archive recognized her queries and responded. It showed them something that made Taeyang's blood run cold. Earth's disappearance had not been random. It had been a defensive protocol, an automatic response to a threat. The archive showed them historical records, other species that had been contained. The pattern was always the same. A civilization would reach a certain level of technological advancement. They would begin experimenting with reality-altering technologies, and the ancient failsafes would trigger, locking them away before they could become too dangerous. Humanity had been experimenting with quantum singularity drives, technology that could fold space, create artificial wormholes, manipulate the fabric of reality itself. The failsafe system had decided that humanity had become a threat, so it had activated the containment protocol. But who controlled the failsafe? Who had decided that Earth needed to be locked away? The archive did not say. It only showed that the decision had been made and executed. Somewhere, someone was watching for dangerous species, and they had judged humanity guilty. They gathered as much data as they could before returning to the ship. The mood was grim. They now knew what had happened to Earth, but knowing did not bring it back. They needed to find who controlled these ancient systems. They needed to convince them to release Earth. The third site was a gas giant with ancient structures floating in its upper atmosphere. The fourth was a moon that showed no signs of life but pulsed with strange energy. At each location they found more pieces of the puzzle. The architects had built a network of monitoring stations, systems that watched the galaxy for signs of dangerous advancement. And at the fifth site, they found the answer they had been looking for, a hidden station in the void between galaxies, a place so remote that no one would ever stumble upon it by accident. Dr. Nari called it a control node, a hub that coordinated all the failsafe systems, but the node was guarded. Not by automated defenses, by ships, living crews who maintained the ancient systems, and when the Dawn's Promise approached, those ships moved to intercept. Commander Hajun recognized the ship designs. Ashtar, Velkari, species from the Galactic Council. They were protecting the control node, which meant the Council knew about the failsafe systems. They had always known. Taiyang felt rage build in his chest. The Council had watched Earth disappear. They had expressed sympathy, all while knowing exactly what had happened and why. They had let humanity suffer, let them believe their home was lost forever when all along they could have explained. The guard ships hailed them. A Velkari admiral appeared on screen. His expression was cold. He told them to turn back. The control node was forbidden to younger species. The secrets it contained were not for humanity to know. If they did not leave immediately, they would be destroyed. Taiyang asked him directly. Did the Council imprison Earth? The admiral did not deny it. He said it was for the galaxy's protection. Humanity had been advancing too quickly, developing weapons and technologies without understanding the consequences. The failsafe was mercy. It had saved humanity from destroying themselves and taking half the galaxy with them. Engineer Minho whispered over the private channel. His modifications were ready. The shields could handle Velkari weapons now, and he had one more surprise, something he had been building in secret, a weapon designed from studying the ancient technology. It was untested. It might blow up the ship, but it was their only chance. Taiyang looked at his crew. They were exhausted. They were outnumbered. They were facing the combined might of the galaxy's oldest civilizations, but they were also angry. They had come too far to turn back now. He gave the order to fight. The Dawn's Promise charged forward as weapons fire filled the void. Minho activated his experimental systems, and the galaxy was about to learn that humanity did not submit quietly to cages, no matter how ancient the locks. The experimental weapon fired. Engineer Minho had called it a phase disruptor. It sent a wave of energy that made reality itself shudder. The Velkari ships flickered like bad images on a screen. Their shields collapsed. Their weapons went offline. For 30 seconds they were helpless. 30 seconds was enough. The Dawn's Promise shot past the guard fleet and dove toward the control node. Commander Hajun piloted like a man possessed, weaving through weapons fire that resumed as the enemy ships recovered. They were not trying to escape anymore. They were trying to get close enough to board the station. The control node loomed ahead. It was massive, a structure the size of a small moon, covered in technology that predated most galactic civilizations. Dr. Nari scanned for entry points. She found one, a docking port that had been added relatively recently, maybe only a few thousand years ago. They slammed into the docking port hard enough to crack the hull plating. Alarms screamed, but they were connected. Taiyang led a boarding team of 8 people, including Nari and Hajun. The rest of the crew would keep the ship ready for a fast escape. If they survived that long. Inside the station, everything was cold and ancient, but there were signs of recent occupation. Equipment that was not billions of years old. Living quarters designed for species that still needed to breathe air. Someone had been maintaining this place. Someone from the Galactic Council. They moved quickly through the corridors. Automated defenses activated, but Nari had studied the ancient technology. She disabled them one by one, using codes extracted from the other archives. It felt wrong, using knowledge stolen from the architects to break into their own systems. But they had no choice. The data archive was at the station's core, a chamber filled with crystalline memory banks that stretched upward into darkness. This was it, the central database for every failsafe system in the galaxy. Every species that had ever been contained would be listed here. Including Earth. Dr. Nari connected her equipment. She started downloading everything. Files that detailed thousands of species locked away over billions of years. Civilizations that had shown promise but grew too dangerous. Races that had been judged and imprisoned before they even knew they were on trial. And there, buried in the records, they found proof. The organization that controlled the failsafes was called the Watchers, a secret group within the Galactic Council, made up of the oldest and most powerful species. They had taken it upon themselves to police the younger races, to decide who was safe and who was not. When humanity started developing quantum singularity technology, the Watchers had convened in secret. They debated for 3 days. Some argued that humans should be given more time. Others said that humanity's aggressive nature combined with reality-altering technology was too dangerous to allow. In the end, they voted, and Earth was sentenced without ever knowing it was accused. Taeyang felt sick. His home had been stolen because of fear, because ancient powers decided humanity might become a threat someday, not because of anything they had done, because of what they might do. Commander Hajun found something else in the files, a list of Watcher members, names that would shock the galaxy, high ambassadors who spoke publicly about peace and cooperation, military leaders who claimed to protect all species equally, scientists who presented themselves as neutral seekers of knowledge, all of them secretly judging which civilizations deserved to exist freely. Alarms blared. The station's security systems had finally locked onto them. Doors sealed. Atmospheric pressure began dropping. They had minutes at most before the station vented the entire section into space. Nari shouted that she needed more time. The download was only half complete. Taeyang made a decision. He ordered the security team to hold the corridor while Nari finished. They had come too far to leave with half the evidence. The security team set up a defensive position as automated weapons emerged from the walls. The fight was brutal and one-sided. The ancient defenses were designed to kill efficiently. 2 of Taeyang's people went down in the first seconds. The rest returned fire, but their weapons barely scratched the armored drones. Commander Hajun pulled a grenade from his belt. Not a standard explosive, something Minho had given him before they left the ship. An electromagnetic pulse device. He threw it into the center of the attacking drones. The explosion was brilliant and silent. Every drone dropped at once, but the pulse also knocked out half their equipment. Suit systems failed. Communication devices went dead. They were running out of air and time. Dr. Nari's hands flew across her console. She was downloading raw data now, compressed files that would take weeks to decode, but it would have to be enough. They ran. Through corridors that were sealing behind them. Past chambers that opened onto the void of space. 3 more crew members were lost when a bulkhead collapsed. Taeyang felt each death like a physical wound. These people had trusted him, and he was leading them to their deaths in a station billions of years old. The Dawn's promise was still docked, still fighting. The guard fleet had given up trying to destroy it. Now they were trying to board. Minho had electrified the hull, turning their own ship into a weapon. Bodies floated around the docking port. The cost was getting higher with every second. They made it back to the ship with seconds to spare. Hajun sealed the airlock personally, making sure no one followed. The Dawn's promise detached violently, tearing away from the station in a shower of sparks and metal fragments. They were free, but they were not safe. The entire Velkari battle fleet was waiting. Dozens of warships in formation, blocking every escape route. The Admiral's face appeared on screen again. He said they had made their choice. Now they would face the consequences. The Watchers could not allow the evidence to leave this place. Humanity's crime was no longer just advancing too quickly. Now it was knowing too much. Taiyang broadcast a message on all frequencies. He told them what they had found. He told them about the Watchers and their secret trials. He told them that Earth had been imprisoned without cause, that thousands of other species had suffered the same fate. He demanded that the galaxy hear the truth. The Velkari admiral laughed. He said no one would believe the word of desperate humans against the testimony of the galaxy's eldest civilizations. The Watchers had maintained order for millions of years. They had kept the galaxy safe from countless threats. Who was humanity to challenge that? Taeyang prepared to order one last desperate attack. They would not win, but they would make the Watchers pay for every human life. Commander Hajun armed every weapon. Engineer Minho diverted all power to the phase disruptor. Dr. Nari clutched her data tablet. The evidence would die with them, but at least they had tried. Then the space around them began to ripple. New ships emerged from faster-than-light jumps. Dozens of them, hundreds. Species that Taeyang recognized from the younger civilizations, the ones who had been overruled when the Watchers voted to contain Earth. Ambassador Bora Lee's face appeared on screen. She smiled tiredly. She said she had been busy while they were gone, building alliances, making promises, calling in favors. The younger species had always suspected the elder civilizations kept secrets. Now they had proof, and they were not going to let the Watchers silence it. The Velkari fleet held position uncertain. They were outnumbered now. A battle here would spark a war that would tear the Galactic Council apart. The Admiral's expression was furious. He demanded the humans surrender the evidence. Bora refused. She said the galaxy deserved the truth. All of it. For a long moment, nobody moved. Two fleets facing each other across the void, waiting to see who would fire first. Then slowly, the Velkari ships began to withdraw. Not in surrender, in calculation. The Watchers would regroup. They would try to control the narrative, but they had lost this battle. As the Dawn's Promise joined the Allied fleet, Taiyang allowed himself a moment of hope. They had the evidence. They had allies. Now they needed to use both to bring Earth home. The real fight was just beginning. Captain Taeyang Kim stared at the empty space where Earth should have been. His hands gripped the armrests of his command chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The main screen showed nothing but darkness and distant stars. No blue planet, no moon. No sun burning bright in the center of their solar system. It was gone. The Dawn's Promise had been mapping a nebula 200 light-years from home when the distress signal started flooding in. Every human colony, every outpost, every ship within range of Earth had sent the same panicked message. Earth had vanished. At first, Taeyang thought it was some kind of communications error. Maybe a solar flare, maybe equipment failure. But as they jumped closer to home, reality became impossible to deny. Dr. Nari Choi ran scans from every sensor on the ship. She checked gravitational readings, electromagnetic signatures, quantum fluctuations. Nothing. Where 16 billion people had lived just days ago, there was only void. The entire solar system had disappeared as if someone had reached into the universe and plucked it out like a flower from a garden. Commander Hajun Park stood beside Taeyang. His jaw set in that way that meant he was fighting to stay calm. He had family on Earth, a brother in Seoul, parents in Busan. Now they were gone, and he had no idea if they were dead or simply somewhere he could not reach. The silence on the bridge was broken by engineer Minho Kang. His voice came through the intercom, shaky and uncertain. He said the ship's navigation system had automatically updated its star charts. Earth no longer existed in any database. The computer had already erased it as if humanity's homeworld had never been there at all. Taeyang forced himself to breathe. He was the captain. His crew needed him to be strong, to have answers. But he had nothing. Just questions that multiplied with every passing second. The communications officer reported that the Galactic Council had convened an emergency session. They were calling it an unprecedented event. The Velkari Dominion was sending survey ships to confirm Earth's disappearance. The Ashtar Collective had issued a statement expressing sympathy for the remaining humans. Sympathy, as if Earth had died of natural causes. Taeyang ordered the Dawn's Promise to jump to the nearest human colony. They needed to regroup to figure out what had happened. But even as they prepared to leave, he could not stop staring at the empty space. Somewhere in that darkness, Earth existed. He refused to believe his home was simply gone forever. The colony of New Incheon was chaos. Thousands of humans had gathered in the main plaza, demanding answers that nobody had. Some cried. Others raged. A few simply sat in shocked silence. Ambassador Bora Lee was already there, trying to maintain order. She looked exhausted, her usual diplomatic composure cracking under the weight of catastrophe. Bora pulled Taeyang aside as soon as he landed. She told him the situation was worse than it appeared. The Galactic Council was already discussing what to do with humanity. Without a homeworld, humans had no official status. Their trade agreements were void. Their territorial claims meant nothing. Some council members were even suggesting that the remaining human colonies should be absorbed into other civilizations for their own protection. Protection? The word tasted like poison. Taeyang knew what it really meant. Without Earth, humanity was vulnerable, weak, easy prey for species that had always resented their rapid rise in galactic society. Dr. Nari approached them with a tablet in her hands. She had been researching ancient databases, looking for any precedent for what had happened. She found something. Old records from civilizations that existed millions of years ago mentioned something called the architects. A species so advanced they had transcended physical form. The records were fragmentary, but they spoke of pocket dimensions, hidden spaces where entire worlds could be placed. Taeyang felt something spark in his chest. Hope, maybe? Or desperation? Either way, it was better than helplessness. He asked Nari what she needed. She said there were ancient ruins scattered across the galaxy, places the architects had left behind. If they could access those sites, they might find answers. They might find a way to bring Earth back. Commander Hajun shook his head. He said the Council would never authorize such a mission. They were already looking for excuses to disband human military assets. An unauthorized expedition would give them the perfect reason. Taeyang knew Hajun was right, but he also knew he could not sit idle while Earth remained lost. That night, Taeyang made his decision. He called for volunteers. Any crew member who wanted to leave could do so with honor and full pay. But those who stayed would be committing to an illegal mission that might get them all killed or imprisoned. He expected maybe half the crew to stay. Every single person volunteered. Engineer Minho said he was not leaving until they found Earth or died trying. The navigation officer said her family was on Earth, so this ship was her family now. One by one, the crew pledged themselves to the mission. Even Commander Hajun, despite his concerns, said he would rather die searching than live with uncertainty. Ambassador Bora promised to buy them time. She would argue at the council, make alliances with sympathetic species, do whatever it took to keep the remaining human colonies safe, while the Dawn's promise searched for answers. She hugged Taeyang before he left, whispering that she believed in him. That Earth was still out there. The Dawn's promise left New Incheon under cover of darkness. They disabled their transponder and jumped to the first set of coordinates Dr. Nari had found. An ancient ruin on a dead world called Qatar 9. The journey would take weeks. In that time, Taeyang studied everything they knew about the architects. He read until his eyes burned, looking for any clue, any hint of what had taken Earth. The crew settled into a tense routine. They maintained the ship, ran drills, prepared for whatever they might find. At night, Taeyang walked the corridors and heard crew members talking quietly. They spoke of home, of families, of whether they would ever see Earth again. Dr. Nari spent hours in her lab, analyzing fragmentary data from the ancient archives. She found references to something called a purge, a great culling that had happened billions of years ago. The architects had apparently saved certain species by hiding them away. But from what? And why Earth now? When they finally arrived at Qatar 9, the planet looked like a graveyard. Ruins covered the surface, structures so old that erosion had worn them smooth. The Dawn's Promise landed near what Nari identified as an archive complex. The away team consisted of Taeyang, Nari, Hajun, and 4 security officers. The ruins were cold and silent. Their footsteps echoed in empty halls. Strange symbols covered the walls, written in a language nobody spoke anymore. But Dr. Nari had studied ancient scripts. She could translate some of it, enough to find what they were looking for. Deep in the archive, they found a data cache still functioning after billions of years. Nari connected her equipment and began downloading. Information flooded her screens. References to pocket dimensions, protocols for moving entire star systems, and something else. Something that made her go pale. She said Earth had not vanished randomly. It had been targeted. Someone or something had triggered an ancient failsafe, a system designed to contain species that grew too dangerous too quickly. The architects had built prisons disguised as sanctuaries, and Earth had been locked away in one of them. Taeyang asked why. What had humanity done to trigger such a response? Before Nari could answer, alarms blared. Hajun shouted that they had company. Ships were entering orbit. Valkyrie Dominion vessels. Fast attack cruisers built for hunting. They ran for the Dawn's promise. Behind them, the ancient archive began to collapse as the Valkyrie bombarded it from orbit. Taeyang realized they had been followed. The Council was not content to let them search. Someone wanted to make sure humanity never learned the truth. As the Dawn's promise lifted off under heavy fire, Taeyang made a promise to himself. He would find Earth, he would bring it back, and whoever had taken his home would answer for it. The Ascendant Council gathered in what had once been the United Nations building. It looked different now, taller, made from materials that seemed to shift and flow like living things. Taeyang stood before them with his crew, trying to understand what humanity had become. The Council debated whether Earth should return to normal space. Some wanted to remain hidden, building strength until they could dominate the galaxy without opposition. Others wanted immediate revenge against the Watchers and everyone who had supported Earth's imprisonment. A few argued for isolation, staying in the pocket dimension forever, safe from external threats. Taeyang listened to them argue and felt something break inside him. This was not the humanity he remembered. These people spoke of conquest and domination. They had survived their imprisonment by becoming exactly what the Watchers feared. Dangerous, aggressive, willing to use overwhelming force to ensure they would never be threatened again. He stood and spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the chamber. He told them about the crew members who had died searching for Earth, about Ambassador Bora Lee fighting to keep the human colonies safe, about the younger species who had risked war to defend humanity's right to exist. He said Earth had allies now, species who believed humanity deserved freedom, not because they feared human power, but because they believed in justice. If Earth returned as conquerors, it would validate every fear the Watchers had ever expressed. It would prove that humanity was too dangerous to exist freely, but if they returned seeking peace, demanding justice without seeking revenge, they could change the galaxy itself. They could show that strength and wisdom were not opposites. The Council representative who had met them at the landing pad spoke. Her name was Jiwoo, and she had been a diplomat before the containment. She said Taeyang's words reminded her of what they had lost in their desperate need to survive. Humanity had always been more than weapons and power. They had been dreamers, explorers, people who believed in making things better. The debate continued for hours. But slowly Taeyang saw opinions shifting. Not everyone agreed, but enough did. Earth would return to normal space, but they would return as themselves, strong enough to defend their freedom, wise enough not to abuse their power. Then the alarm sounded. Dr. Nari's instruments detected massive energy signatures at the dimensional barrier. Ships were approaching, hundreds of them. The Watchers had realized that Earth might escape. They were coming to finish what they started, to collapse the pocket dimension entirely, erasing Earth and everyone on it from existence. The Ascendant Council mobilized immediately. Earth's defense fleet launched from lunar bases, ships that burned with captured starlight, vessels designed with 3 years of focused development, built specifically to ensure humanity would never be vulnerable again. Commander Hajun watched the fleet deploy and felt both pride and fear. Humanity had become terrifyingly powerful. The Watcher fleet began bombarding the dimensional barrier, trying to destabilize it, trying to trap Earth forever. The human fleet emerged through the barrier to engage them. The battle was brutal. Human weapons tore through enemy shields like paper, phase disruptors that made matter cease to exist, energy beams that ignored conventional defenses, missiles that could track targets across dimensional boundaries. But the Watchers were ancient and cunning. They had fought wars before most current civilizations existed. They deployed weapons that turned space itself into a weapon, gravity wells that crushed ships like tin cans, reality anchors that prevented dimensional jumps, and finally a dimensional collapse bomb, a device that would seal the pocket dimension permanently. Dr. Nari analyzed the bomb's energy signature from Earth's surface. She said there was only one way to stop it. Someone would need to stabilize the dimensional membrane from both sides simultaneously. From inside the pocket dimension and outside, it would require perfect coordination. And whoever stayed on the outside would be trapped when the membrane stabilized. Cut off from Earth forever, Engineer Minho volunteered immediately. He was still recovering from injuries sustained during the mission to steal the evidence. His movements were slower. His breathing labored, but his mind was sharp. He said he had built the dimensional bridge technology. He understood it better than anyone. He could do this, Taeyang refused. He said they would find another way. Minho smiled and said, sometimes the only way forward required sacrifice. He had a ship prepared, a small vessel loaded with the equipment he needed. He would fly through the barrier, deploy the stabilization field from outside, and coordinate with Nari's team on Earth. Together, they would anchor the dimensional membrane permanently. Before anyone could stop him, Minho launched. His ship shot through the dimensional barrier, just as the collapse bomb detonated. Reality screamed. The barrier began folding in on itself. But Minho deployed his stabilizers, and Nari activated the corresponding systems on Earth. The dimensional membrane fought between collapse and stability. Minho's voice came through the communications channel one last time. He said tell his family he was sorry. Tell them he did what needed to be done. Tell them Earth was coming home. Then his signal cut out. The stabilizers locked into place. The dimensional membrane stopped collapsing and began stabilizing into something new. Not a barrier, a permanent gateway. The pocket dimension tore open. Earth emerged into normal space, but not where it had been before. The transition had moved them. They appeared at the heart of the galaxy, in a region that had been empty void. Suddenly there was a star system where none should exist. Earth burned like a new sun on every galactic map. The Watcher fleet fell back in shock. They had expected to destroy Earth. Instead, humanity had escaped their prison and positioned themselves at the galaxy's center. Impossible to ignore. Impossible to threaten without triggering a war that would tear civilized space apart. Earth broadcast a message to the Galactic Council. Taeyang wrote it personally, choosing each word carefully. It said they did not choose this. They had been imprisoned for fear, judged without trial, sentenced without crime. They returned not for revenge, but for justice. They claimed their place among galactic civilization, not as conquerors, but as equals. And they would defend that place with everything they had become. The message spread across the galaxy within hours. Some species celebrated. Others panicked. The elder civilizations convened emergency sessions. The Watchers tried to control the narrative, but it was too late. The evidence was public. The truth was known. And humanity stood at the galaxy's heart, impossible to dismiss or ignore. Ambassador Bora Lee seized the moment. She demanded a reformation of the Galactic Council, new rules that protected younger species, transparency in decision-making, the permanent dissolution of the Watchers and their secret trials. Some elder species refused. A few even prepared for war. But most, seeing Earth's fleet and reading the mood of the younger civilizations, chose wisdom over pride. A new council formed over the following months. Earth became a founding member with full voting rights. The Watchers were disbanded. The pocket dimension technology was placed under multinational control. Species that had been imprisoned for millions of years were offered the chance to return, if they chose. Not all accepted. Some had changed too much. Others had died out. But for those who wanted freedom, it was finally offered. But victory came with costs. Captain Taeyang confronted the Ascendant Council about what humanity had become. The coordination network that connected every human mind. The weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. The willingness to use overwhelming force. He said these things had allowed humanity to survive, but they could not be allowed to define them forever. Jiwoo and others who remembered life before the containment agreed. Gradually, Earth began to change. The coordination network was made voluntary instead of mandatory. Weapon systems were scaled back to defensive levels. The focus shifted from survival at any cost to building a sustainable future. It was not easy. Many people had grown comfortable with the power and certainty the old systems provided. But humanity had always been adaptable. The galaxy transformed as well. Younger species, inspired by humanity's return, demanded reforms in their own governments. The old order that had ruled through fear and secret manipulation was crumbling. It would take generations to build something better. But the process had begun. 1 year after Earth's return, Captain Taeyang stood in a park in Seoul. Real grass under his feet. Real sun warming his face. He had retired from active service. His mission was complete. Earth was home. The crew of the Dawn's Promise had scattered to their own lives. Some joined the new defense force. Others became diplomats or scientists. A few simply went home to families they thought they had lost forever. Dr. Nari continued her research, now with access to technologies from across the galaxy. She was working on peaceful applications for dimensional science, ways to travel that did not rely on potentially dangerous quantum singularities. She visited Taeyang sometimes. They would talk about the mission, about the people they had lost, about Minho, who had given his life to save Earth. Commander Hajun had taken command of Earth's defense fleet, not to threaten anyone, but to ensure Earth would never be vulnerable again. The evidence spread across the galaxy like fire. Dr. Nari's stolen data files were broadcast on every frequency, uploaded to every database, shared through every network. Within hours, billions of beings knew the truth about the Watchers, the secret trials, the imprisoned civilizations, the arrogance of judging entire species based on fear. The Galactic Council erupted into chaos. Representatives from younger species demanded answers. The elder civilizations tried to justify their actions. Some claimed the Watchers had prevented countless catastrophes. Others argued that extreme measures were necessary to maintain galactic stability. But the younger races were not listening to excuses anymore. Ambassador Bora Lee stood before the council and presented humanity's case. Earth had been imprisoned without trial. 16 billion people had been stolen from their home because of what they might become, not what they had done. She demanded that the council vote to release Earth immediately. The elder species refused. They said the fail-safes existed for good reasons. Opening them carelessly could endanger everyone. Taeyang watched the proceedings from the Dawn's Promise. His ship was docked at a neutral station undergoing repairs. Half the crew was in medical facilities. The other half was exhausted. They had won the battle for the evidence. But the war for Earth's freedom was far from over. Dr. Nari was still analyzing the data from the control node. She had found something crucial. Technical specifications for the pocket dimensions, energy signatures, coordinates, mathematical formulas that described how the fail-safe systems worked. In theory, it was possible to open a dimensional bridge, to reach Earth without needing the Watcher's permission, but the power requirements were immense. They needed a singularity core, technology that could generate enough energy to tear open reality itself. The same quantum singularity drives that had triggered Earth's imprisonment in the first place. And only the ancient civilizations possessed such devices. Commander Hajun said it was impossible. The elder species would never give them access to singularity technology. Not after everything that had happened. They would rather let Earth remain imprisoned forever than risk humanity obtaining that kind of power. But Engineer Minho disagreed. He said not all elder civilizations supported the Watchers. The Ashtar Collective had been divided on the issue of containing Earth. Some Ashtar elders had voted against it. Maybe with the right approach they could be convinced to help. Taeyang made a decision. He would approach the Ashtar directly, not through official channels, not through the council. He would meet with them privately and appeal to whatever conscience they still had. It was a desperate plan, but desperation was all they had left. The meeting took place on a remote Ashtar outpost. 3 elders agreed to see him. They were ancient beings who had lived for thousands of years. Their faces were unreadable, their eyes distant. Taeyang told them everything. About his search. About the crew members who had died. About billions of humans trapped in a dimensional prison through no fault of their own. One of the elders spoke. She said they had opposed Earth's containment from the beginning. They had argued that humanity deserved the chance to prove themselves trustworthy. But they had been outvoted by those who feared human aggression and unpredictability. Now, seeing the evidence of how the Watchers operated in secret, she felt shame for her civilization's complicity. The elders debated among themselves in their own language. Taeyang could not understand the words, but he could read their expressions. Doubt, guilt, fear of consequences. Finally, they reached a decision. They would provide a singularity core, but not a new one. They would give him a decommissioned unit from a retired warship. It was old, unstable, and might explode at any moment, but it was the best they could offer without triggering a galactic incident. The core arrived at the neutral station inside a heavily shielded container. Warning labels covered every surface in a dozen languages. All of them said the same thing: dangerous, unstable, use only as a last resort. Minho looked at it with the expression of someone who had been given a live grenade with a faulty pin. He said he could make it work. Maybe. The core would need to be integrated into the ship's systems. They would need to modify the engines, the power grid, the structural supports, basically rebuild half the ship around a bomb that could vaporize them at any moment. It would take weeks. And even then, there was no guarantee it would not kill them all the moment they activated it. The crew voted. Every single person chose to continue. They had come too far to stop now. For weeks, they worked around the clock, welding new supports, rerouting power systems, installing containment fields that might hold the core stable, or might fail catastrophically. There was no way to test it without actually using it. Dr. Nari used the time to calculate exactly where they needed to be. The dimensional bridge had to open at the precise coordinates where Earth once existed. If they were off by even a few thousand kilometers, the bridge might open into empty space. Or worse, into the solid matter of another dimension. The mathematics were complex and unforgiving. Finally, they were ready. The Dawn's promise looked different now, bulkier, covered in additional armor and energy projectors. At its heart, the singularity core pulsed with barely contained power. It felt alive, angry, like it wanted to explode just to spite them. They jumped to the coordinates, empty space where Earth should have been, where the sun should have warmed their faces, where humanity should have been building its future among the stars. Now there was nothing, just the memory of home. Taeyang gave the order. Engineer Minho activated the singularity core. Power flooded through the ship. Reality itself began to bend. Space twisted into shapes that hurt to perceive. Dr. Nari watched her instruments frantically, making tiny adjustments to keep the dimensional bridge stable. For 30 seconds, a window opened into another dimension. Through it, they saw Earth, blue and green and beautiful. The moon hung in the sky exactly where it should be. The sun burned with familiar warmth, but something was different. The planet glowed with energy that should not exist. Massive orbital structures surrounded it. The moon itself had been transformed into something that looked like a fortress. Then a signal broadcast from Earth. Not a greeting, a warning: stay back. We are not the same anymore. Do not approach. Taeyang made a split-second decision. Before the bridge could close, he ordered the ship forward. They dove through the dimensional tear. Reality screamed around them. The ship shook so violently that equipment tore free from its mountings. Alarms blared. The singularity core was overloading. They emerged on the other side. In orbit around Earth, home. But weapons immediately locked onto them from every direction. Orbital platforms. Lunar defenses. Ships that moved with impossible speed. A voice broadcast a challenge. Identify yourselves. Explain why you violated our dimensional barrier. You have 10 seconds before we open fire, Taeyang responded. He told them who they were. The Dawn's promise. Humans from the colonies. They had spent months searching for Earth. They had stolen evidence from the Watchers. They had fought the Velkari fleet. They had come to bring Earth home. Silence. Then a new voice, older, more tired. It said they were granted permission to land. But they should be prepared. Earth had changed. 3 years in isolation had transformed them. What they would find might not be the home they remembered. The Dawn's promise descended through the atmosphere. Below them, cities glowed with light that was not electric. Structures rose that defied architectural sense. The sky itself seemed different. Clearer, as if pollution had been completely eliminated. They landed in what had once been Seoul. The city was recognizable, but transformed. Buildings had been rebuilt with materials that shimmered like liquid metal. Transportation systems moved in 3 dimensions. And the people? The people looked normal at first glance, but their movements were too coordinated, too synchronized, as if they were all connected to something invisible. A delegation met them at the landing pad. They called themselves the Ascendant Council. Earth's new leadership. They explained what had happened. When Earth was locked in the pocket dimension, humanity realized they were alone. Cut off from the galaxy, they had three choices: give up and die, survive and stagnate, or adapt and grow stronger. They chose the third option. They had reverse-engineered the dimensional barriers that imprisoned them, turned them into power sources, developed technologies that made the Watchers' fears look justified. They had weapons that could shatter planets, shields that could bend space. And most disturbing of all, they had created a coordination network, a system that connected every human mind on Earth into a collective strategic intelligence. Taeyang felt cold. This was what humanity had become when faced with isolation and fear. They had survived, but at what cost? He asked if they were still human. The council representative smiled sadly. She said they were more human than ever, because humanity had always been at its most dangerous when threatened. Now they had the power to prove it. The question was not whether Earth could return to normal space. With their new technology, they could tear open the dimensional barrier whenever they wanted. The question was whether they should, whether the galaxy was ready for what humanity had become,